Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Germany. Welcome to Darmstadt. This is the Stadion am Bottenfauler. Hopefully, I've said that right. Norwich City, obviously playing Darmstadt in a pre-season friendly here today to kick-start that German tour that they're on at the moment. Games obviously here tonight, and then on Saturday against Kaiserslautern in their 50,000-seater stadium, which is going to be epic. But it started here tonight against a club and a team who have just been promoted. Back to the Bundesliga for the first time essentially since 2017 or so. It was a really good test, really competitive game, a lot more competitive actually than a lot of the championship games that we saw last season, but a really good workout for Norwich City. I mean, David Wagner, prior to Norwich City coming out to Germany, spoke about wanting to increase the intensity and the level of opposition. This was certainly the way that they were going to achieve that. They weren't going to be able to do that in England. They needed to go to Germany. This was the perfect way to do it, and this was the perfect place to do it. Darmstadt, this was their first game of their pre-season campaign today ahead of that Bundesliga big kickoff, which I believe starts at Eintracht Frankfurt for them, which is not too far away on the train. But you could really see actually given what Norwich had last week, Barnet, which is another great game of football, King's Lynn, which maybe wasn't really a competitive affair, to then go to this tonight felt like a real step up in their intensity. And actually there was some stuff we could analyse in terms of the football, because Norwich did stuff differently and they did it well, and there were points I felt where they looked really good with the way that they tried to play. So let's sort of go through no Angus Gunn tonight. That was expected really. I think David Wagner said after King's Lynn on Saturday that he was expected to get his first minutes against Kaiserslautern on Saturday. We did see Andrew Mohamedeli. He came on in the second half. Good to see him sort of blow out the cobwebs, so to speak, and I thought he looked quite composing, quite commanding when he came on, as he does when he plays. Saw Shane Duffy again, got another sighter of him alongside Ben Gibson. The back four was pretty stout. I was impressed by Jack Stacey again. Tim Krul was in goal. McLean, wearing the captain's armband for the second time, was alongside Liam Gibbs. Hernandez was on the left, Rowe on the right, with Marcelino Nunez in a more advanced position behind Josh Sargent. That's how Norwich City started. And it was really interesting because I spoke to Kenny McLean after the game, and he said actually in the last few days, certainly since they've been here, they've been doing a lot of work on their kind of out of possession shape and their rest defending and their transitional work. And I felt you could see that out of possession tonight. Norwich looked really, really solid, and they did a slightly different thing when they built up as well. I think I've spoken about it countless times on these verdicts. They've kind of built up with a back three where a midfielder drops in, you know the score now, and then they kind of create a six going forward, and then a one. But that six has left a massive pocket of space inside, and we've seen that happen to Liverpool, for example, and teams have kind of began to exploit that, and they've made a clever tweak to Alexander-Arnold and how he comes in, and they build up in a slightly different way. Norwich are doing similar now. Tonight, certainly, they built up at points in a 3-3-4, which is much different, and that involved two wingers dropping deeper at points and kind of inverting, and then pushing fullbacks on and having two kind of flat strikers as opposed to maybe the two that we've seen. And then in the second half, we saw them do something different again. There were points in the game, situations where Ashley Barnes would come deep, almost in that false nine position that maybe people will have seen him play for Burnley, and they pushed the two wide players on a lot, and I guess that was to kind of utilise the space of Przemysław Boheta in behind, of Christoph Solis as well, although I felt he had a difficult night, just some really poor decisions, playing in poor areas, turning into poor areas, but the intent is there. So that was really interesting. Norwich starting to do things from a footballing perspective a lot differently to the way that they did it last year. And off the ball, I felt we saw real promise actually of that partnership between Duffy and Gibson. And I want to see a bit more. So I want to see them put under a bit more strain, and maybe that will come with Alkmaar, with Toulouse, with Olympiacos in the latter ends of pre-season, when there's a bit more pace in behind, or there's a bit more of nip and a team willing to play at them. But Norwich reduced Darmstadt here tonight to very little in terms of clear-cut opportunities, and that was largely because of what they were doing off the ball and how much more structured and organised they looked. And that credit has to go to the coaching team for that, and they have to make sure now that becomes a regular fixture. It's incredibly difficult, and I don't get the impression, and not based off tonight, but based off what we've seen from David Wagner's team since he's been at Norwich, and based off various different aspects, I don't get the impression that Norwich are going to be a team who dominate possession, who have the majority of the ball. I think what we're going to see, and actually when they look most lively tonight, was in real moments of transition when Jack Stacey was overlapping. That's how the first goal, or the only goal of this game, came about. Norwich winning a turnover, transitional, Jack Stacey getting it up the pitch, really really quick to get ahead of his man, nip the ball through someone's legs, whip a ball across, it comes out, and Nunez, almost like a piece of elastic, really, the way he connected with it. I think Josh Sargent's finish against Watford, but maybe slightly less impressive and with an open goal. It was a bit like that. Somehow manages to get his foot kind of in line with his shoulder to connect with it and just sort of push through it and have to take it in the back of the net. But it was a goal that was, for me, kind of established on the foundations that I think Norwich City will utilise next season. That ability to spring forward, attack with pace, and there's a quote actually, and it was used in Ben Lee, who is kind of our analyst. Really, he analyses a lot of what Norwich City do and analyses what David Wagner wants to do. He spoke about it in his piece as well. How it's a quote from Jurgen Klopp. We know David Wagner is heavily inspired. Their football is pretty similar, but he used the point that actually counter-pressing and pressing can be better than any playmaker, because if your opposing team has got players committed forward and you win a turnover in a high area of the pitch, you can go and flood players and you can go and cause problems. You don't necessarily need to have creativity in maybe the conventional way that we think about it, with real technicians in the side. And that was kind of what we saw tonight, really. Norwich didn't have that number 10 space vacated a lot, because the way they play, and from what I've just spoken about with their build-up structure or Ashley Barnes dropping in and various different elements, they kind of need that space to utilise what they want to do in and out of possession and be quite flexible and quite fluid with that. And then equally, I know there's a major clamour for a defensive midfielder, but the way that Wagner wants his teams to play, that double pivot tonight, it was McLean and Gibbs, and then it was Sorensen and Springett ended the game. We saw McLean and Sorensen for a little while. He wants them to be energetic. He wants them to go and support the press. He wants them to maybe risk a little bit and leave a bit of space in behind to go and support what Norwich want to do out of possession and press in that way. For me, if you're just going to put someone who sits there, which I think is what a lot of people want, that won't then function in the way that he wants it to function. And that's why I think we've ended up in a situation where Norwich don't have that natural defensive midfielder. Look, personally, I would rather Norwich did have one, and I'd rather they played in that way. But I just think the way that David Wagner wants to play, we saw him at Huddersfield. He had Jonathan Hogg, who was kind of a sitting midfielder, but performed that role of dropping in, also went to support. They didn't really have that natural midfield. They had Hogg and Moy was really their double axis, wasn't it, that had so much success for them in the Championship. And I think that's where Norwich would like to get to with McLean and with Gabby Sarro. If you could get to that in a midfield too and function in that way, there are a lot of other support networks that you need in order to make that work. But I think there is some fruits there that can be successful. So that was interesting tactically, and I felt Norwich looked better for all of those tactical tweaks and changes that were made tonight. And it's interesting now to see a centre of stage where fitness was maybe the emphasis and the priority, onto some work with the football and some work tactically of what they're doing. And I know that Narcis Palash has been involved in that and been really is really highly thought of in terms of the work that he's been able to do, particularly with a player like Marcelino Nunez, scored tonight, played in a slightly deeper role throughout pre-season and has done that in maybe a different kind of way. He was played a bit more advanced today, and I think he's better in that role. That's just my view, and was able to get around the pitch a lot more. A couple of errors maybe in deeper positions, gave the ball away on one occasion that I can think of. Darmstadt pressed pretty well throughout the game, really, which was a major reason for that. So lots of interesting stuff happening, lots of interesting stuff that they're doing, lots of interesting good stuff that they're doing. I'd still like to see them be a bit better in possession, although I felt largely that was much improved from what we saw at Lynn and Barnet in particular. And like I say, throughout pre-season, you're not dissecting anything with real detail. You're looking for trends, i.e., are they building up in a different way? Are they defending in a different way? How are they doing certain things? And we're beginning to see them do different things differently, and that's exciting, I think, and that shows a willingness to evolve from maybe what last season was, away from that 3-6-1 structure that caused them so many problems towards the back end of that campaign, to one which maybe can be a bit more flexible, a bit more fluid, and actually is probably a trend in world football right now. We're seeing teams move to that kind of free structure, particularly when defending, because it protects them from not just from counter-attacks, but it also helps them in terms of their counter-pressing and how they do that. So that's really interesting as well. I'm increasingly impressed with Jack Stacey. I think that's worth a mention as well. I think if you were to put a crown on someone's head and say you are Norwich City's man of pre-season so far, I think Jack Stacey will be wearing it, because he has shown quality, he's shown athleticism. Again, probably one that you'd like to see get tested a bit more defensively. There was one instance just around there, where he kind of lost a foot race with a Darmstadt player. I can't remember who it was exactly. Managed to hook his foot round, seemed an impossible angle, but managed to hook his foot round, win the ball and set Norwich off an attack. And I think Sargent was played down the right and just couldn't. The attack kind of fizzled out. I don't think Nunez got on the end of a ball, but that initial action to then transition it into what Norwich City want to do. That's going to be so crucial for next season. So he's really impressed. Also with his ability in the final third, his poise, his seems to have real clarity in the final third. And what I mean about that is he knows, okay, I can take an extra touch here. And if I take an extra touch, he just seems to think quicker than opponents from what we've seen so far. And of course, that can be quality. And Darmstadt haven't quite kicked in their pre-season yet. And I want to see him more defensively. But I like the early signs of what he's doing. Shane Duffy as well. I thought he looked really good tonight alongside Ben Gibson. They're really solid. As I said earlier, you probably want to see them put under a little more strain, but that will come. And then I really enjoyed Ashley Barnes starting a fight towards the end when he was unhappy with a challenge from Christos Solis. And when we spoke about intangibles, that's what Norwich City wouldn't have done last year. They didn't have a player who was willing to go and support their mate and willing to go and get in people's faces and willing to go and be a bit nasty. And I think he actually had hold of two of them. I mean, I was in this stand and that happened over there somewhere and I was scared. So goodness knows how those defenders felt. But those kind of intangible qualities, that injection of experience and mentality, that's exactly what the aim was. And why Ashley Barnes was bought to Norwich City. So that was good. Jollis, I thought had a difficult night. Like I say, positionally, just felt like he didn't really grasp. Maybe it was a lack of clarity of instructions, but just felt he wasn't playing in good areas. And it was a difficult night for him. I felt, and still that rawness that you get from him, and I still, if I'm honest, foresee him going out on loan next season. Likewise, Shemi Porheta, who I think has had a positive pre-season by and large. He's quite lively tonight. I just sometimes think it's a weird expression, but sometimes I think his feet's a little too quick for his brain. He does things, and by the time he's done it, his brain's just kind of processed what he's just done, and maybe he gets caught out by that. And there's still some elements technically that need some work. But in terms of work rate and commitment, I don't think you can fault what he's done so far, and he's liked by Wagner, and I guess because he has that intensity and that willing to run and whatnot. It was lovely to see Christoph Zimmermann again. And as a very final note, I spoke to him after the game. You'll be able to read that and listen to that across our Pinkham channels in the coming hours and days. But really lovely to catch up with him. He's had a fantastic season here, obviously, since he left Norwich City a year ago. Got promoted back to the Bundesliga, playing an integral part there, just preparing to go into his first ever Bundesliga season as a footballer. I think he's 30, 31 maybe now. Sorry, Zimbo, if I've got your age wrong, but around that type of age, and always dreamt of playing in the Bundesliga. Was always kind of dismissed, told he wasn't good enough. Obviously got the chance at Norwich, and interestingly kind of expressed gratitude at being allowed to head out last summer when it looked like he wasn't going to play very much. So that's a really nice chat, and I'm really looking forward to bringing you that. And he went to watch Norwich in training and spoke to a few of the staff earlier, because Norwich have been training and are training, I think, tomorrow and Friday. They're training here on Friday. We'll be here for that open training session, and then tomorrow they're out there as well before they then head south a little bit to their base ahead of Kaiserslautern, where there will be a new home kit. So watch out for that. So yeah, it was good to see Zimbo. Really nice moments with him, kind of in the tunnel and with players, and kind of did the lap. Norwich fans were in kind of that bit of just where the D is there, just where that's where they were. Zimbo came over and lots of applause and shared mutual love between both parties towards that. So that was nice. Lovely to see him. Lovely to catch up with him as well. And that's pretty much it. The sun is setting on Darmstadt, as you can see. It's a really glorious setup here. Let me just spin you around. So that's the stand. You've got almost an open terrace at that end. This is going to be a Bundesliga football ground, and this stand that I'm stood in now, this is the first game that it's been operational since it was built. I think it was opened in, oh no, maybe that's wrong. I think it was opened in February. The Darmstadt guy was telling me, so I might have got the information wrong, but this is newly built. I think that stand over there they all used to be open. They've put a lot of investment into their ground and into their infrastructure because of Bundesliga requirements, and it's a fabulous place to visit and to watch football. I've really enjoyed coming here, and it's been a good test, and we're looking forward to Kaiserslautern as well. Of course, we are in Germany, as you can see. I'm not in front of a green screen. That's definitely real. So make sure you subscribe to the Pinkham Plus app. Follow all of our coverage as well. We've got video and interviews coming with David Wagner, Kenny McLean, Christoph Zimmermann, all that good stuff over the next day or so. And we'll be at Kaiserslautern as well. So the only place to cover Norwich City on tour this summer, and we're absolutely delighted to be here. It's a lot cooler now, so it's quite nice. Yesterday was blisteringly hot, so yeah, it's good. And we'll also be at Alkmaar and in Austria as well. I'll leave you with your evenings. I've got to go and get a back page done, otherwise I'll stand here waffling for hours. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you if you're watching on YouTube and you're subscribed. We've just surpassed 8,000, so make sure you jump on board. I know a lot of you watching this won't be subscribed on YouTube. Head over there, Pinken, search the Pinken in the top bar, get subscribed. And of course I must thank, just as a final one, our sponsors, Cavill Healthcare, who have made all of this possible. So we appreciate them. If you're looking for a job in care, or you are looking for care for a loved one, Cavill Healthcare is the place to go. They do some great work in East Anglia at Norfolk as well. So check them out. Right, from Darmstadt, over and out. Good night all.